What's up everyone, Darkblade here with another Hunter's Guide to Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. In this video, we're going to be showing you an endgame build, this time for the hammer. Now what is an endgame build? Well, it's a build that is constructed from various pieces of endgame monster armor, talismans, weapons, and more. It also features high tier decorations as well as Krios crafting, although when it comes to the Krios crafting we haven't gone too overboard, so the skills and decoration upgrades should be obtainable with little farming. Now as always, if you find these videos helpful, informative or entertaining, please consider leaving a like on the video as well as subscribing to the channel, as it allows me to bring you more builds for a variety of hunting styles. Now when it comes to the hammer, it's in a very good place in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. It's fun to use, from its blunt aspect, being able to knock out monsters, crowd controlling them, to being able to utilise elements and ailments more effectively thanks to the Courage playstyle. It's definitely an enjoyable weapon to use. But this hammer build I'm going to be showing off today doesn't focus entirely on DPS, as it has a lot of survival aspects and quality of life aspects. So for this build, I'm just going to refer to it as the Divine Hammer build. This build utilises DPS, quality of life and defense like I mentioned, specifically skills like Defiance and Divine Blessing, to which is where I got the name from. So for this Divine Hammer build you'll need the following. First up is the Lunagoron Helm, then you need the Golden Lune Mail, Golden Lune Braces, Archfiend Armor Aura, and the Golden Lune Greaves. As for your Petalace, this is down to personal preference, but as this build steers more towards survivability, I've gone for an absolute Petalace. As for your talisman, not everyone's going to have access to the same talismans unfortunately, but if you can get a talisman that has at least critical eye up to level 3 and a few decoration slots on it, you should be able to produce something similar to what is shown here. As for my weapon, I'm using the Devil's Die, which is the Scorned Magnum Marlow hammer. For the Krios crafting, I've gone for an affinity increase as well as an attack boost increase, and as for your Rampage decoration, go with one of the anti-species decorations. And speaking of decorations, you've got a fair few to play around with, so first of all I've gone for Handicraft Jewels to get a few points in the Handicraft skill. These are optional jewels though, to be honest, you can replace them if you want. I've then gone for Critical Jewels to max out Crit Boost, Tenderizer Jewels to max out Weakness Exploit, Grinder Jewels to max out Speed Sharpening, Expert Jewels to max out Critical Eye, a Wirebug Whisperer Jewel to max out Wirebug Whisperer, Jumping Jewels for a few points in Evade Extender, Sharp Jewels to max out Protective Polish, and then a Sperry Bird's Core decoration for a point in that skill. So if you've done what I've done here, you'll have a build with a raw attack of 375 with a blast rating of 34. You'll also have a okay chunk of purple sharpness with 45% base affinity. This can be 95 when you take into account weakness exploit, and you'll have a decent defense of 741 that is strong against every element except for the thunder element. As for the switch skills, these are down to personal preference depending on how you like to use the hammer. As this is more of a raw attack build than an elemental or ailment build, it can get away with using either playstyle, either the strength playstyle or the courage playstyle. So as for the skills, first of all you'll have Critical Eye at level 7, increasing the base affinity of this build. You'll then have Defiance at level 5. Defiance is a wonderful quality of life and defensive skill, as whenever a monster becomes enraged, which is when they are normally at the most dangerous, you'll gain increased defense, as well as become immune to monster roars, wind effects, and tremors. You'll then have Peak Performance at level 3. This is a skill that, whenever our health is full, will gain increased raw attack. This can be tricky to maintain against certain monsters, but nonetheless rewards this build for keeping your health high. You'll then have Critical Boost at level 3, which is a skill that whenever our attacks crit a monster, they'll deal increased raw damage. You'll then have Weakness Exploit at level 3, increasing our affinity by up to 50% whenever we're attacking monster weak points. You'll then have Handicraft at level 3, increasing the sharpness of this build. This, to be honest, is an optional skill. You can drop this for something else if you so wish, or if you don't have a similar talisman to what is featured in this build here. But Handicraft allows us to keep the purple sharpness on this weapon a little bit longer, which also is the job of the next skill, which is Protected Polish, which is a skill that whenever we sharpen our weapon will put a protective coating over our sharpness gauge, preventing any sharpness loss for a small duration of time. So this combined with Handicraft should allow us to keep the purple sharpness on the Scorned Magnum Marlow hammer for long periods of time. Anyway, you'll then have Divine Blessing at level 3, which is a useful and wonderful defensive and quality of life skill that gives us a 50% chance that when we take a hit from a monster, we'll take reduced damage. This, combined with Defiance, are two of the key survival skills with this build. But there are more. For example, we then have Recovery Up at level 3. Recovery Up is a skill that increases how much health is restored when we drink a potion and such. You'll then have Speed Sharpening at level 3. Speed Sharpening is a skill that severely reduces the time it takes to sharpen our weapon, working well in unison with Protective Polish. You'll then have Wirebug Whisperer at level 3. Wirebug Whisperer at level 3 reduces the cooldown on our Wirebugs, allowing us to use our Silkbind attacks more often, and on top of that it allows us to hold additional Wirebugs for longer periods. Anyway, you'll then have Chain Crit at level 3. Chain Crit is a skill that when we continuously land hits on a monster, it will gradually increase the attack value and elemental value of the build. So the more frequent and quicker we attack, the more of a bonus we'll get from Chain Crit. Anyway, next up is Evade Extender, another quality of life skill, and it could be seen as a defensive skill that basically increases the distance at which we dodge and evade. You'll then have Counter Strike at level 2, which is a byproduct that temporarily increases our attack power after we've been knocked back. You'll then have Horn Maestro at level 1, which is a skill that is not needed on this build whatsoever. It's a hunting horn skill. It's a result of the Krios crafting, to be honest. So we can ignore this skill in all honesty. Next up is Flinch Free at level 1, reducing minor knockbacks from monsters and more importantly our allies, which is very useful for the hammer, I must say. And then you'll finally have Spirit Bird Call at level 1, which is a useful quality of life skill that I highly recommend, as during the course of a hunt, Spirit Birds will come to your location, to your hunter, so it reduces the need for you to go and hunt them down. So those are all the key skills for this Divine Hammer build. Let's quickly move on to talk about the Krios crafting. Now, like I said, in these builds, even though they are endgame builds, they don't feature Krios crafting at the absolute rarest. Krios crafting is a very RNG heavy mechanic, and whilst you can get very useful skills from it, it's very unlikely. So, most of these endgame builds, when it comes to the Krios crafting, will rarely feature skills like Weakness Exploit, Crit Boost, Attack Boost, so on and so forth. There may be 1 or 2 points in them, but for the most part, I just focus on upgrading or increasing the amount of decoration slots we have. So, for the Lunagoran Helm, we've got an additional tier 1 decoration slot, as well as a point in Flinch Free. For the Golden Loon Mel, we simply have an increase to our defense. For the Golden Loon Braces, we have a tier 3 decoration slot upgrade. For the Archfiend Armor Aura, we have an additional tier 1 decoration slot, as well as a point in Recovery Up and a point in Horn Maestro. And then for the Golden Loon Greaves, this is probably the rarest out of the bunch, we simply have a point in Weakness Exploit. But to be honest, if you were able to get a tier 2 decoration slot in any of these armor pieces through the Krios crafting, you can simply add another Tenderizer decoration to get you that Weakness Exploit skill. But every build out there comes with various positives and negatives, pros and cons, good points and bad points. Even these endgame builds come with them. When it comes to this Divine Hammer build, its biggest pro is its survivability. Thanks to having skills like Evade Window, Defiance, and Divine Blessing, we're able to survive the toughest hunts in the game, and should we take a hit, we can quickly heal up thanks to skills like Recovery Up. On top of that, this build is decent when it comes to dealing damage as well. It's able to bring down monsters quite quickly, thanks to the fact that it has damage related skills and focuses on high raw attack. And on top of that, the final pro for this build is it can be used against pretty much any monster. Like I said, it focuses more on raw attack than elements or ailments, which means that we can take it against pretty much any monster. Yes, we do have a blast rating on the Scorn Magnamalo hammer, and this can add a little bit of extra damage, but raw attack is the main star of this build. But of course there are cons. One of the biggest cons for this build is occasionally you may have sharpness issues in prolonged fights. This has been countered slightly thanks to Handicraft, the optional decoration, as well as Protected Polish, but it's still something to be aware of. And the other con is, unfortunately, it can be tricky to keep peak performance active all the time. This build is able to take a hit. In fact, it's able to take multiple hits before you need to heal up, which means that you can sometimes lose that peak performance buff fairly easily. That being said, when taking on afflicted monsters though, thanks to the Blood Blight and being able to heal ourselves through attacking, this build and its peak performance actually works quite well. But nonetheless, like I said, it's something you still need to be aware of. But at the end of the day, if you're looking for a comfy hammer build to use, something that you can use against the endgame afflicted monsters and should perform adequately in both terms of survivability and DPS, then I'd strongly recommend this Divine Hammer build. But what are your thoughts? Please leave a comment down below, and until next time, I've been Darkblade, bringing you another endgame build, this time for the hammer in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.